Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Roselli. I'm the executive editor of Griffin House Books. Thank you for joining us today. We are really excited to present Dr. Julie Terigny. She is the founder and director of the Colorado Center for Pediatric Learning and Development. She's written 2 books so far with us at Griffin House, so we're thrilled to present her work here today. Her first book was Calm and in Control, Simple and Effective Strategies to Support Young Children with Self-Regulation. And her most recent book with us is Organized and Engaged, Simple and Effective Strategies to Support Executive Function Skills. Our spring releases are out. There's Julie's book, Organized and Engaged, the little boy in the blue and white shirt, looking very excited. And please connect with Griffin House on social media. We're on all the platforms. We are offering a special offer, 20% off if you use the code BOOKCHATS and order through griffinhouse.com for any purchases that you make. And as I said, Dr. Julie Terigny is founder and director of the Colorado Center for Pediatric Learning and Development. She has written some books to help us with handling maybe some challenging behaviors or some concerning behaviors in the classroom. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for that great introduction and welcome everyone. I am so happy to be here and share with you for the next hour strategies that I hope will be simple and, of course, effective to embed into your classrooms right away to be supporting the children that you're teaching and working with, supporting the development of those executive function skills. Today, let me advance my slide. Today, we are going to understand, before we start talking about our strategies and ideas and tips to support self-regulation, to support executive function, we're going to understand what it is. I think it's a well-used word. I think it's commonly heard in early learning environments these days, and I want to make sure that we really understand it because I think to properly understand it is one of the best ways to support and nurture and develop the skill. We'll then, once we understand it, learn strategies to support the 3 main components of executive function, which include, as you can see there, attentional flexibility, working memory, and inhibitory control. I'm going to break those 3 components of executive function out into separate entities, both in our description of what they are and then specific strategies to support them in the classroom and early learning environments. I probably have some additional slides at the end of this presentation that we're not going to get to. I'm not used to talking for only 45 to 55 minutes, especially because it's based on a whole entire book and a really big concept. So I really felt it was important to add a few extra strategies, tips, things for you to think about and understand that you can read. You'll have access to this handout, I think, as early as tomorrow. So if we don't get to it today in our live conversation, you'll be able to read through my ideas and thoughts on those things in your own time. And then we should have at least 5 minutes. I don't know that we'll have much more time for that, for questions and comments. But at the end of the presentation, my email is there, and I would be happy for you to email me anytime with any comments, thoughts, ideas, questions that you might have. I'd be happy to kind of process through those things with you if we don't get to your questions or comments in those last 5 minutes today. Okay, so what is executive function? The reason we're here today, and thanks again for being here to discuss and think about this with me. It is, by definition, a group of mental skills that includes the 3 main components: attentional flexibility, working memory, and inhibitory control. It's a skill, and it's important to remember that it's a skill because that means we're not born with it. People aren't born with the ability to use executive function. It develops over time with maturation, so as we learn and grow, and as we practice. And that's why This is the perfect opportunity, the perfect age in your early learning environments from 2 years old up through 6, 7 years old at the end of kindergarten to be nurturing and developing and honing in on improving these skills in the children that are in your classrooms. The way you want to think about it, and we'll talk about how children rely on the skills, is kind of a juggling act of managing the tasks and activities that we should be doing while blocking out and filtering all of the things that are going on around us that are considered distractions. So in my room right now, I can see outside and I can see birds and a river, and I on purpose am blocking out that visual distraction so that I can stay focused here with you on what I should be talking about. We don't think about this all the time, but at some point you, the kids we're working with, have to learn this. We have to learn I need to not look out the window right now because it'll distract me and it'll take some of my mental energy away from what I should be focusing on, which is giving this webinar to you. It also helps us inhibit what we might want to do. So not only are we focusing on what we should, but we're also saying, I am not going to check Instagram right now. I mean, of course I wouldn't, but there is something maybe in your minds as you're listening to me that's saying to you, ooh, I'd like to check my email or my text or my Instagram to see if there's something new on my social media. Executive function helps us say no to that desire, again, so that we can be successful focusing on managing and participating in what we should. So for kids specifically, they rely on these 3 executive functions, the flexibility, working memory, and inhibitory control, as they learn, play, and socialize all throughout their day. Some examples of that is, or some ways that executive function supports children through the day. It supports them with appropriate transitions, turn taking, practicing self-control, so not grabbing a toy from a peer just because you want it, problem solving, staying on task, and completing those activities and tasks in a timely manner. Socializing, so being able to participate in conversations in a back and forth way, remembering what was said to you, participating by listening when it's your turn to listen, and then responding or talking when it's your turn to do that, and then negotiating conflict. These are all things that are happening in our early learning classrooms from preschool, pre-K through kindergarten, all throughout the day. Let's think about it in action for a second. So think for a second, depending on what classroom you're in or what environment you're in. What are the skills required of your students as they transition from their home to the classroom? I'm sure you've established some type of a routine for that. So your students are needing to remember that routine. They're needing to remember to put their backpacks, jackets, what have you, in their cubbies. Maybe you have them sign into class, so they're needing to remember to stop and do that part of the routine. They probably need to wash their hands. So not only do they need to do that as one of the steps, one of the transition steps from home to classroom environment, but also within that activity, they need to remember, first I turn the water on, I get my hands wet, I soap up my hands, I lather them to wash the germs off for a certain amount of time, I rinse, I turn the water off, I dry. And then they find something to engage with while they're waiting for the actual school day to begin. Executive function is supporting kids through all of that, especially because the ratio is different from home. The ratio at school is you, maybe an aide, maybe a parent helper, and then 12 to 30 students, children in the classroom. So that ratio of adult to child is much bigger in our class environments, our school environments. So executive function is what helps a student manage themselves different from how they might at home. Here's another example of executive function in action. So let's say during circle time, children need a lot of executive function there because this is large group instruction. So your whole class is maybe sitting down and listening to you give a lesson, read a book, talk about morning meeting. They need to stay for that full amount of time and be focused and listening to what you're saying. They need to be blocking out all of that extraneous, the sights and sounds happening all around them. They need to say, oh, I'm not going to be fiddling with my friend's hair in front of me, or playing with my shoes, or what have you. They're keeping their hands to themselves. They need to tell themselves, this is not the time for me to be socializing or talking with my friends. And then they need to sustain that attention, like I said, for the entire amount of time, however long it is. And then finally, if you give an instruction for the next activity, so you're kind of setting them up to transition from circle to center time, or to free choice time, or snack time, or whatever it is, the children must remember what you've told them as they get up, transition to that next spot, gather materials maybe that they need, whether it's food items for snack or lunchtime, or classroom items for maybe a sit-down learning activity, and then they need to start working on their own. Executive function is supporting them through all of that. So as I alluded to, it's made up of 3 primary components that we're now going to kind of digest and pick apart now. The 3 include attentional flexibility, working memory, and inhibitory control. Attentional flexibility. I feel like hopefully you're familiar with this term. Of all of the 3, I feel like this is one that's talked about quite a bit, at least in our environments. Attentional flexibility is the ability to switch focus from one activity to another. That's called task switching. It's the ability to switch gears when needed, to be flexible when there's a change or disruption to the usual routine, or to be resilient when something that we expect to happen doesn't. For example, if Stephanie doesn't mind, she's the moderator of this today. So we all thank you, Stephanie, for not minding. We all get on about a half an hour early, which is really unnecessary. There's no reason to get on a half an hour early unless we wanted to socialize or what have you, until there's a problem. And today there was. Today, I don't know why, but for some reason, Stephanie's maybe old laptop that needs to be replaced decided it was not going to log on correctly for her. And so we tried in all the ways to make that work. Maybe a different room, maybe, shutting down the computer and starting it up again. And none of them worked. And we are getting closer and closer to our start time of 12 o'clock, which means we need to think in a new way. We need to not become upset. We need to not become overly frustrated or shut down. We need to not abandon this lecture, this webinar that's happening, but think in a flexible way of what else can we do. And luckily, truly, this technology supports an alternative, which means she was able to call in. And so that's why her visual's not up, because the computer wasn't working. So it's the ability to be flexible when what you think is going to happen doesn't. And thinking of a new idea to still participate and be a part of what you should, without that event, without that hiccup, causing a big emotional response or reaction that leads to abandoning the activity. Kids who are good at attentional flexibility are better in the classroom at paying attention to what they should be. They're better at filtering those visual and auditory distractions. They are absolutely able to respond as they should be, as I just described with Stephanie, to disruptions. They can learn how to play in new ways, and they're good problem solvers. Again, it lets us look at situations in new ways. It lets us find new solutions to solve problems. It lets us shift gears when what's supposed to happen doesn't. If you think of a classroom environment, whether it's for toddlers all the way up through high school, this is happening all the time. What we want to happen often doesn't. That toy we wanted to play with is sometimes lost. We want to go outside and play on the playground because we had so much fun yesterday making a really neat obstacle course, or we had a great time playing with a friend at the sandbox, but it's raining today. So we're continually needing kids to be flexible in their thinking and resilient to looking at things in new ways, because everything is new for them. And many times throughout the day, what we want to happen, what we expect to happen, what we hope to be able to play with is not going to work out the way that we'd like it to. Filtering, which is another part or component of attentional flexibility, is that ability to recognize that I alluded to earlier, the difference between what's important to be focusing on and what isn't. In our classroom settings, that irrelevant information or the unimportant is typically the visual and auditory distractions happening in the classroom and all around the classroom. So outside the window or in the hallway. So it's kids playing with things when they should be listening, and we're trying to kind of keep our control and not play as well. It's somebody coughing, it's a fan humming, it's a light flickering. Again, at some point, because this is a skill and we're born not knowing what's important and what isn't, we have to learn that. And so as kids get older, as they're hitting the end of kindergarten, they have an excellent understanding of what they should be focusing on and what they should be filtering out because it's not important in the moment. A toddler, however, in those early learning environments is going to have a harder time because they haven't learned as long as older children have what things are considered relevant and irrelevant. The other thing to think about too, before we move to working memory, is that not only does the brain need to filter out that extraneous information, but it needs to remain alert and vigilant, kind of in the background, to the incoming information that could be important and come up, like, for example, a fire alarm might happen, or a surprise visitor enters the classroom, maybe for a holiday or a special party. Children who struggle with filtering are, and this is important, and I bet you have experienced or have someone in your environment right now who struggles with this. They're expending an incredible amount of energy because they're focusing on everything all at once. Everything is important to them. So when someone walks by in the hallway and the door's open, that's important to them. When a bird flies by and they're close to the window, that's important to them. So they may be trying their hardest to focus on the activity or the person who's talking, but they're also focusing on these things because they're not good at filtering yet. And it can cause them to experience fatigue. It can cause them to abandon the activity that they should be. It can cause them to not be able to be as successful as they otherwise might because that mental energy is so taxed. I like this example, and I'd like you to kind of read it as I have it written here while I explain it to you. Kelsey is a preschooler that I worked with, and I went into her classroom because she was struggling with attentional flexibility in a variety of ways. She's one of those kids who likes things the way she likes it. She likes things to, she considers things to be right or wrong. There's one right way to play. There's one right way to do something. She also maybe is one of those kids who has to sit in the same spot on the carpet all the time because it's her spot, and she's inflexible with thinking that she could maybe sit somewhere else. So she always likes to play at the kitchen in the morning. So she's good at her routines. She's good at that transition. And then after she's put her stuff in her cubby, washed her hands, what have you, she plays at the play kitchen. Well, one morning when I was there, she was not able to play at the kitchen because it had a little break to it. It was one of those wooden kitchens, and they were repairing it for safety. And Kelsey, I don't have it written here. All I have is that she couldn't fill her time then. She was unable to fill that time in a different way because in her mind, she always plays with the kitchen in the morning. She always occupies that unstructured time before the school day starts with pretend play at the kitchen. And when it wasn't there, she wasn't able to shift gears and be flexible and go find something else to do, even though, as you can imagine, her environment is filled with other things that she could be doing. Okay, so if you have questions on that, write them in the chat because we'll get to them at the end. I can't address them right now, but put them in the chat so that we can at the end there. So working memory is the second main component of executive function. It's a type of short-term memory that helps people retain important information, but also recall it, use it, manipulate it, work with it in some way in an immediate short-term amount of time. So Here's a nice example. My oldest son is turning 19. He has his first serious girlfriend who he's had since for almost a year. I think August, they were really a couple. I can use my long-term memory to think about my first relationship, my first significant relationship back, 20, 30, however long ago, years ago. My short-term memory, I'm going to have my son's name is Ian and his girlfriend's name is Noelle. I'm going to have Noelle's parents over for dinner, let's say later this week. So in my short-term memory, what do I need to remember? Their names, maybe the dad, he does have a shellfish allergy. I need to be remembering that. I probably want to be remembering the time we agreed on and the meal that I'm going to prepare. So that's my short-term memory. Remembering those important and new things. My working memory is different from that. So let's think about working memory as a type of short-term memory, but more of a mental to-do list or a grocery list, if you will. So let's just use that and say that I have forgotten that I'm going to make a dessert, and when I go to bake that dessert, I'm out of vanilla extract. And as I'm driving to the store to buy the vanilla extract that I need, I realize maybe I'd like to buy flowers too. My working memory holds that in a very short-term space. When I go to the grocery store, I need to use it. I need to remember I'm there for vanilla extract and flowers. I'm sure some of you on this have done this before, where you get to the grocery store and you probably don't just have 2 things on your list. You maybe have 5 on your mental list and you remember 3 for some reason, and you get home and 2 of those things you really needed were forgotten about. When I get home with my 2 things that I didn't forget, the vanilla extract and the flowers, I forget that information. I don't need to know this anymore. So I absolutely need to remember Noelle's parents' name and that dad has a shellfish allergy and probably a few other short-term memory things for the dinner that's coming up in a couple days. But I erased from my memory the vanilla extract and the flowers because it's not relevant anymore. Our children are using this all the time in the classroom. I mean, from the beginning of the day when they get there until they get picked up, whenever that is. Working memory is being drawn upon for activities, for social conversations, for retelling a story. All through the day, we're doing this. It's responsible for recalling and following instructions and doing those in the correct order if the activity has a correct order or sequence to it. Recalling details during social interaction, so remembering what someone said, or if there's a big, elaborate pretend play experience happening, kind of remembering who's who and what their magic powers are or what have you. And then again, retelling a story. This is an example of Pilar. She is a kindergartner who has never attended school before. She has an au pair at home or nannying at home or what have you, and her parents chose for some reason not to put her in preschool or pre-K. So she's entered school for the first time in kindergarten. And this means, as you can imagine, that following rules and routines in a group setting is new for her. So the other kids in her kindergarten have been to preschool or daycare before. They understand that transition from home to school, washing their hands, putting things in their cubby, finding something to do. But Pilar doesn't have this in her short-term or long-term memory. So it's a brand new experience for her. And it's one that absolutely needs to be practiced and worked on because she doesn't have a good system for putting down, let's just use putting her outside stuff, her backpack, her water bottle, her jacket into her cubby. So sometimes she remembers to do that. Other times she's so excited to enter the classroom, she just drops everything in a pile. You probably have kids who do this right in the classroom and they run to what they want to do. Other times she comes in and keeps her backpack on, washes her hands and goes right to play. So this is an example of someone who is absolutely needing working memory and to practice it, to be able to go through the morning routine because it's different from the other kids who kind of committed to memory what that routine is like. It's novel for her and it's something that is a challenge for her. And then our third component is inhibitory control. So this one's the ability to pause before reacting. So right now, I don't, but I'm just pretending. Right now, I want to check Instagram. I want to check that social media, or I want to check and see. I have 3 kids in school. If one of them has texted me, I don't know, with a problem, I can inhibit that reaction. So my brain just told me what it wants. It wants to check my phone. I can pause and inhibit that reaction because this is what I need to be doing. This is what's important. It helps people control those impulses so that they're able to focus on what they should be rather than what they want to. Now, I don't mean that in this example. I absolutely want to be focusing on this webinar, but a young child needs to use inhibitory control to wait their turn. Maybe you have one of those kids in the class who's so eager and so involved and excited to be at school, but they also want to be the person who answers every question. And they also don't want to be the second or third or fourth to be called. When their hand goes up, they want to be the first to be called. Inhibitory control allows them to wait their turn. It allows them to resist the temptations, one of which I just described, like looking at Instagram. It helps them block out the irrelevant sights and sounds. That's the filtering of attentional flexibility, but acting on it is where inhibitory control comes in. So not only are they blocking out the things that are important in our environment, those visual and auditory things, but they're not acting on it. They're not going out into the hallway to see who's making a noise, for example. And then inhibitory control is really important for helping children persist at an activity when they're bored. So some kids might be getting bored towards the end of a longer learning block, or when the activity is challenging and hard for them. And there's probably kids in your class who, when they perceive that the activity has gotten too hard, they're not able or not willing to persist at it or stay with that activity. There are 2 types of inhibitory control. Attentional inhibition, which we touched on, is that ability to block out irrelevant information and also not act on it so that you can be focusing on what you should. And then response inhibition is exactly what I said with the Instagram. I am not going to look at my phone. I'm going to focus on this webinar. I'm not going to blurt out the answer if I'm a really eager 5-year-old in class. I'm going to raise my hand, and I am going to wait to be called on, is an example of strong response inhibition skill. What I'd love for you to think about, because it is hard for kids, what's going on around you and your environment right now? What things do you not even realize you're so good at just blocking out? I am really good at going into a restaurant and just focusing on whoever I went with. If I went with just my husband, or if I went with my whole family, or if I went with a couple of girlfriends, I don't know why, but I have an excellent skill at being able to be focused on and attentive to just those people I'm with. But I have quite a few girlfriends who are not. And they are absolutely drawn to the conversations or the people happening around them. So that's an example of it is a difficulty with attentional inhibition, but it's something that's very hard for a lot of people. It's extremely hard for little kids. This is the last and most difficult things for kids to really learn how to do is block out those things that are going on around them, especially if there's children in your classroom who have big behaviors, challenging behaviors, to not kind of copy them, mimic them, do what they're doing, go with them, but to instead attend to and focus on what they should be. That's hard for little kids to do. And then response inhibition, again, it's the ability to think about their action, how it might affect themselves or someone else. Blurting, for example, is going to be unfair to the other kids in the class, so that they can follow those classroom rules and routines. They can remain calm and in control and patient while they're waiting for their turn. They can share limited resources, and they're good socializers. They're good interacting with their peers and classmates. I like this example of Mila. She was not someone I worked with in kindergarten. I worked with her when she was 3 years old in preschool. And she is the perfect example of an over-eager, loves to be in class, loves to participate and share kind of a kid. And that did not serve her well when she did her half-day preschool because she needed to be the first in line. She needed to be the first to answer. She needed to always be helping the teacher and kind of overly involved. And that doesn't work well in a class of kind of 12 to 18 3-year-olds. So a lot of times what happened is when she didn't get her way, not the way of the rules and routines of the class, but Mila's way in that 3-year-old, when she was 3 years old, she'd cry, she would sulk, she would cause a disruption to the class, she would cause a negative social interaction with her classmates and her teacher. So we worked hard on lots of things. This is just one example. She also had a lot of trouble. She's an only child, not winning. So if she played a game, she had to win, which lots of 3 and 4-year-olds kind of have to win, or they become upset. That's pretty developmentally appropriate. But she always wanted to engage in the games and then win, and then become very upset when she didn't. So I checked in on her a couple years later when she went up to kindergarten, and saw that over time and maturation and with a lot of practice, she, during her circle time, was able to listen intently, wait to be called on. When she was called on, this is the beginning of school, when she was finally called on to share what she did over the summer, she was overzealous. She did kind of share maybe more than what was appropriate given, the amount of time that kids kind of think they have to answer a question. But she didn't blurt, and she was able to wait her turn and be a part of those established kind of school norms. And then during that time, the teacher was handing out class jobs and had a finite number of them. So maybe there's 20 kids, 25 or so kids in the class, and she had 5 jobs. And Mila was not one of the students that was called on for that week for the jobs. And I could see disappointment. I know her, so I could tell that she was disappointed, but she did not cry or sulk or cause a big disruption, putting attention onto her because she was upset. And I mean, I didn't really have a big interaction with her, but I am hopeful that she was able to remind herself, as the teacher said, you didn't get a job this week, but that means you probably will next week or the week after. Okay. So I am very hopeful that you have a great understanding of exactly what executive function is. And furthermore, those 3 important and integrated but different components, including the attentional flexibility, the working memory, and the inhibitory control, because now we're going to discuss our strategies and tips that you can use right away. You may need to go to the library and borrow some books if you don't own the ones that I'm going to mention and you want to use them, but these should be tips and ideas that you can start today using if you want to, without either changing your current routine and your current kind of classroom management, and without having to purchase really expensive or anything items at all. Okay? If you have questions, put them in there, because we're going to have time at the end. The main ways you're going to support attentional flexibility, in my opinion, are these 4 things that you can be doing all throughout the day. You're going to model for students how you're flexible. You're going to employ metacognition and theory of mind, which we'll talk about in a second. And then a phenomenal strategy, if you're not already doing this, is reading books. Of course, we know the power of reading to our students. If you can intentionally choose books who have strong main characters who are inflexible thinkers, you are going to absolutely create a strategy to teach, talk about, and implement ideas for being more flexible without it having a direct impact in a negative way on your students. You're not targeting any of your inflexible thinkers who are in your classroom. You're targeting the inflexible thinker in the book you're reading. And by way of that, you're teaching some students who might be inflexible thinkers in your classroom, strategies and tips they can use to be more flexible. So you might want to write this down. I have 3 of my favorite books, and I can put them in the chat at the end too, but I think you can write them. And maybe you actually already use them because they're pretty popular. The first one is Ricky, the Rock That Couldn't Roll. That one's by Mr. J. The next one I love is Amelia Bedelia's First Day of School. You might want to use that with your older students. Amelia Bedelia, I'm pretty sure might be a first grader, so your kindergartners would love to listen to books by her. Amelia Bedelia's First Day of School is by Herman Parrish. And then the third one is Spring Stinks, a Little Bruce book. And that one there is by Ryan Higgins. The reason I chose these 3, I love them. They're very well used and well known, but they're books. One has a human. Amelia Bedelia is a human female. Ricky the Rock is, let's call it mythical, if you will, or I mean, it's a non-human or animal that's been personified. And then Spring Stinks is about a bear and a bunny. So you've got 3 different things you can be using, whether it's human, animal, or mythical, all of which are inflexible thinkers. And as you're reading these books, this age group loves problems. They love to solve problems. They love when things go wrong. So you're going to be really highlighting, as you're reading the book, what did Amelia do? What did she think? How did she hear, the teacher say X, Y, or Z? And what should she have thought? What could she have done? And we're building strategies to be more flexible when those issues might come up with our students, but also we're showing our students that flexible thinking is an important skill. Okay? Metacognition, large word, sounds difficult, but really all it is bringing awareness to one's own thought process. How do I think about the way I think? So I just told you I have excellent inhibitory control when I'm in a restaurant. I do not get distracted at all by people or sounds around me. I can just focus on who I'm with. So I have a good understanding about how I think and interact in that social situation. But maybe my working memory is not so strong. It actually isn't. I think probably most adults who have a lot on their plate do not have great working memory because we're multitasking and trying to remember so many things. So I am mindful that I don't have great working memory. I think I'm going to remember my 4 or 5 things on my grocery list that I want to bring home tonight before I come home from work. But let's face it, I'm not going to. So what do? I brought these. I make a sticky note and I put it I don't put it on my computer because I'm driving home. I'll put it on my steering wheel or my purse or my wallet so that I can easily remember what I need to without using my working memory. My metacognition has taught me that I have great inhibitory control, but my working memory has waned as I become more busy, as I am more busy. You can teach kids that thinking about how they think is important. And one of the best ways to do that in our early learning classrooms is just modeling. So you're reminding yourself, not them. Again, we don't want to target anyone. You don't want to target your friends, your partners, your family members, and for sure little kids, what they don't do well. No one likes that. And of course they don't. We don't like that. So you're going to model for your students, okay, I wanted to go outside today. I brought in some fun activities for us. I brought in ribbons and a cool hopscotch game, and I was really looking forward to showing all of you that in outside recess, and it's raining, and now we have to do inside recess. I'm really frustrated about this, but we still get to have recess. It's not outside like I had planned for, but I'm going to think of stuff that we can do inside, or maybe we can still do the hopscotch inside. Maybe I'll just make a hopscotch board with tape or chalk or something on the carpet. So one way to bring to light helping kids think about how they might think about a situation is modeling how you do. Talking about how you switch gears and how you're flexible. And then the next one, and I like I like doing this by talking, and I should have written it down. I'm sorry I didn't, but also having visuals of our senses. So I use my eyes to see. And when my teacher's talking to me, I tell my eyes, look right at her. I use my ears to listen. And when the audio book is on, I have to tell my ears, okay, ears, it's time for you to listen to that. So it sounds a little juvenile, but we're talking to a group of 2 to 6 year olds who maybe aren't thinking about what they used to hear or what they used to see. So we're helping kids visualize either by talking about it or having the model of a big eye or a big ear or a big brain kind of in there, up on the wall somewhere. I'm using my brain for learning, and I'm turning my brain on. I'm turning on my listening ear. So we're helping kids think about thinking about learning. And that's exactly what metacognition is. And when you bring to light for a kid something's important, if you tell them, hey, this is important, it's important to think about how you think. It's important and good to be a flexible thinker without saying when you're a rigid thinker, it's bad. Kids are going to respond to that, and they're going to develop that skill. Theory of mind is the opposite. It's thinking about how another person thinks. Now, this is an incredibly difficult concept for our little kids to learn because they're just learning about what they themselves like. So it's a hard concept to think that not everyone thinks the way you do. Not everyone thinks going home is good. Not everyone thinks playing on the playground is fun. You do. You love going outside for recess, but there are kids who don't like that. That's a hard concept, this theory of mind of thinking about another person, but it's one of the most important strategies as kids get older to learn to make them be more flexible in their thinking. You must have kids in your class who tattle and say, she did it wrong. She's not playing the right way. She's not doing it right. Those are kids who could benefit from understanding theory of mind, that not everyone's going to play the same way or think the same way or learn the same way or act the same way. It will help kids be more flexible with their thinking. And then we've got some games and activities to support flexible thinking. So the big two are, can we do it a different way? Or how else can I get there? Those are kind of similar. And then what else can it be? So these are games that in the book, Organize and Engage, it really defines and describes how you could implement it. But in a nutshell, for can we do it a different way? I want you to describe or think about a common task or activity, and then with your class, and then propose to them how could we do it different. So for example, let's say you have a class plant. And so you bring to your small group or your whole group, we always water our plant the same way with this watering can. So you've brought the watering can and the plant. But let's say that another class borrows the watering can. How could we water the plant differently? How could we do it a different way? So we're teaching this flexible thinking. We're teaching how to switch gears or have a different lens on things without it being related to negotiating conflict between peers. And there's no right or wrong answer to how do we water a plant different. The idea is, can we do it a different way? And yes, we can. We could use a cup to water the plant. We could bring the plant outside and use a hose. We could put the plant in the sink and turn the tap on. So, the point isn't, the point is wonderful to be thinking about doing things differently. But once your children understand the idea of can we do it a different way, when they come to you with a problem, because they're negotiating conflict all the time with their peers, we can say to them, okay, can we do it a different way? You want to play dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs are all getting, haircuts at the pretend PlayStation that the girls have taken over. Can you play a different way? Can you occupy your time a different way? So we've taught flexible thinking by how do we water our plant different, or how we always go to the lunchroom by walking down the stairs and through the main hall, but can we walk there a different way? So if you embed this game or activity of thinking of how to do common things differently, when children need to negotiate a conflict, you can employ that thinking, that mindset that they've already learned in that difficult moment. The other way to think about this is taking a physical object. I brought a little towel, and asking your kids, asking your students in a small group or whole instruction, what else can this be? So I hope you can see this. This is a little towel. What else can a towel be? I use this towel in the bathroom to dry my hands, but this could be a Band-Aid, right? If we were playing like, I don't know, we're doctor and somebody gets hurt. It could be a blanket for one of our dinosaurs or our stuffies when they go to bed. It could be a shield, and it could protect us from the superpowers of the person over there that we're playing with. So again, when you have your students who come to me, they're not playing with it right. They're not doing it the right way. If you're teaching these games and activities throughout your week or throughout your day of how can we use this different? How could we use a paper towel roll different? Paper towel roll is meant to hold paper towels, but it could also be a telescope or a magnifying glass or a sound machine or something like that. When you're teaching these types of games, we're teaching kids to think flexibly, then they can be flexible when they're negotiating conflict throughout the day with their peers. Working memory. We have two more, and we will have 5 minutes, I promise, to answer questions. And then I don't mind going over the time if somebody wants to stay on and do that too. Working memory. Remember, kids rely on working memory for those multi-step activities, being successful with novel activities, and then having good social interactions. Your strategies are take away some of the need to use working memory, number one. So remember Pilar, she'd never been to school before, and so her working memory was significantly taxed at that transition from home to school because she didn't have that in her memory yet. She was using that as a working memory. So memorizing classroom rules and routines, memorizing as much as possible will help by not taxing working memory. Using metacognition, right? So I've got to really turn my brain on here. I've got to really be thinking about remembering all these steps, because remembering these steps is what's important right now. So we're alerting kids to thinking about how they think, and we're telling them that it's important to be remembering and to be following the order and the sequence of rules and activities. Parroting. So parroting means you say, okay, we're gonna get our scissors, our colored pencils, and our glue stick before we sit down so that we can work on our Mother's Day card. And you ask the kids in your class, your small group or large group, to parrot back to you what they heard. We're gonna get our glue stick, our colored pencils, and our scissors before we sit down. And then rhythmic proprioceptive input. It's just a big term, but basically it means doing something rhythmic, so clapping, snapping, tapping. So in the example of the Mother's Day card, we're going to get our colored pencils, our glue stick, our scissors, our colored pencils, our glue sticks, our scissors. So we're adding in that rhythmic kind of, and the proprioception is kind of, there's just some pressure to it, input, to help kids remember and recall what they should be getting. It's our glue sticks, our scissors, our colored pencils, our glue sticks, our scissors, our colored pencils. And we continue that until everybody's collected their materials and are sitting down to work. Again, remember, I'm teaching you, or I'm giving you tips and strategies that you can quickly and easily embed into your daily routine so that you can be supporting, in this instance, working memory skills. Okay, so the last thing about working memory that's really important, we can't understand an infinite amount. We can't remember and use an infinite amount of working memory at one time. I can definitely remember without using a sticky note, the vanilla extract and the flowers. I can probably remember 4 things on a grocery list. But once we get bigger than that, I need to write it down. My working memory is my flaw, for sure. Unlike my other things, I need a tool to help me because it's absolutely limited. So when an activity is novel or new, every step of that activity has to hold a place in the child's working memory. So here's a great example. No, I'm skipping ahead. Miss Rogers is introducing what she thinks is a new activity in her class. It's called paper tearing. I bet lots of you have done it before. You get pretty tissue paper, you tear it up into small pieces, you glue it on and make a beautiful pattern, a hot air balloon or a rainbow or, some type of spring scene. So she has decided she's teaching this small group of students that they're going to make pictures that look like stained glass. She says to the whole group, at your desks, you're going to find everything you need to make the creation. First, choose the colors you want, tear the tissue, get the contact paper because it's sticky, stick it on, ta-da. Well, 4 of the kids did this last year in their pre-K class. They get right to work. Their memory has it perfectly in place. One of the kids, Roscoe, was not in that class. This is his first time doing a paper tearing activity. So while the other kids have it in their memory because they've done it before, maybe lots of times, Roscoe never has. And now he's saying to the teacher, I've never done this before. I don't know what to do. Because all of what she described, the kids have chunked together as one activity. They've called it the paper tearing activity. And they know all the steps that go to it. But Roscoe has never done it. And so each step needs to hold a place in his memory. And maybe the teacher went a little bit fast, or maybe Roscoe wasn't really kind of honed in and listening. And so he doesn't have a sense of where to start and how to start. So be careful of that when we give novel activities for our students. So the activities, these are 2 more activities or 2 games. The one that I wanted to show you, there's 2 here. One am I forgetting and what's missing? The one game I wanted to show you is what's missing. And this is an excellent game to improve working memory and draw attention to the importance of working memory. So you're going to have 3 to 5 objects. I brought what I have here. So this is my lip gloss. You're not going to use these in your class. This is my LaCroix soda, my phone, and a book. You lie those 4 objects out. You can't see this, and I'm sorry. You lie these 4 objects out for all the kids who are participating in the activity to see on the carpet. They're looking at the book, the LaCroix, the lip gloss, and the phone. Then you let them have an amount of time. You're telling them with metacognition, we're using our brain and our eyes to remember what's here. You cover it up, and you remove one of the objects. So I'm going to remove, the lip gloss. Then you reveal, you uncover the objects, and you ask your students to tell you what's missing. That is an excellent way to teach the importance of memory and using working memory and having labels and, identifying things and really be paying attention to what is there and what isn't there. And then also, this lends itself to be really thinking about what am I missing in activities that have a sequence, that have cutting and gluing and coloring. They can be thinking, because you've played this game with them, what is it that I'm missing in my part to whole of the activity? Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about is how do you support inhibitory control in the classroom so that your students, your children are able to pay attention to what they should be, ignore distractions, and be patient and maintain self-control. The first one is time management skills. So kids can't tell time, but if you help them understand with your regular routine, morning, afternoon, and night, then they're better able to remain patient throughout the day. You're modeling your theory of mind skills. So you're showing them that not everyone is going to pay attention. Not everyone in the class is going to be focused on what they should, but that you still can be. You're going to be cueing those metacognition strategies, so reminding kids to be thinking about how they think, thinking about what they should be doing, that they're focused in the moment on their center activity or their seated worksheet or their circle time activity or their lunch. Lunch is a really tough one for kids to be focusing on eating instead of socializing. That's really hard for them to do. And then you're going to add in movement input. The more a student moves throughout the day, the better they are to sit and focus, right? So I bet we've all seen that information. Activities that involve movement, balance, coordination throughout the school day, embedded in through the day, are going to help kids stay alert and calm. I bet some of you are fatigued now because we're an hour in and you are getting tired because I haven't asked you to move. And we don't sit like this usually for a whole hour doing nothing. If I had stopped this and said, okay, everyone, we're going to start, I want you to jump up and down, or I want you to tap your legs, or I want you to clap your hands, you would increase your ability to remain alert and calm to this webinar. And it's the same for kids. Here's some activities. So here's where we've gotten, and I'm out of time, and I want to answer questions now, so we can turn on the sound, or I can answer questions however you'd like, Stephanie. But here's the rest of the slides that I put a lot of detail in. So tomorrow, when you access them, you have 10 slides you can look at for activities to support inhibitory control and then executive function as a whole.
So Julie, really quick, we've gotten some great questions from our audience. How does self-regulation ability, what are those abilities, how do they connect with executive function abilities?
Yeah, I love that question. And truly, if I had more time, I would have done a whole slide sequence on that because they're so interconnected. They're absolutely reliant on each other. So when we have strong self-regulation skills, we are in a great place to be developing and using our executive function skills. And so self-regulation, for anyone who isn't aware of that term, is how we stay calm when something makes us feel a big feel. So when we're feeling a big emotion, how do we react to it? Do we fly off the handle? Do we create a big emotional reaction? Or are we able to take a deep breath, regulate that emotion, and continue with the school day? So the two of them are incredibly interrelated.
And I think we have time for one more. How does boredom affect executive function?
So boredom is definitely in that kind of inhibitory control spot. So kids get bored. They absolutely do. They haven't either learned how to pay attention for their age appropriate amount of time. So a 5-year-old, we want them to be paying attention for 10, 15 minutes at a time to something. If a 5-year-old isn't able to do that yet, then they're going to get bored. If they haven't been taught the importance and value of being in school and listening, or if we're in an environment where the demand of listening and paying attention is too heavy, then kids are going to get bored and they are unable to control those impulses. They're going to abandon the activity. They're going to misbehave. They're going to fidget. They're just going to not be a part of the activity any longer.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie. This has been really informative. We've gotten some great questions. We look forward to moving on to other presentations later on. We invite you to join the early learning book chats and also connect with Griffin House at griffinhouse.com. Don't forget that you can offer feedback on this webinar as well as access the slides through EdWeb. And we also invite you to reach out. If you have any other questions, you can reach out directly to griffinhouse.com, and we're happy to connect with you. And don't forget to check out Julie's books. Organized and Engaged is her most recent book, and it addresses executive function. Thank you, Julie, so much. This was great.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you were all able to attend. And please email me. My email is there at the end if you have questions, since I didn't give us a lot of time for them.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.